All right, Ghost of Yote is the sequel to Ghost of Tsushima that was developed by Sucker Punch Studio. It's a first party PlayStation studio. Previously, they have done the Sly Cooper series and the Infamous series, and now they've really gotten the ball rolling on this samurai action adventure series, the Ghost series. This is the most recent entry in the franchise, and this entry stars Atsu, who is a wandering samurai who has suffered a great tragic loss in her past and is now trying to avenge the deaths of her family and try to wrangle in a rogue warlord samurai that is trying to overtake the island of Izo where the titular Mount Yotei take is. So this is a sequel to Ghost of Tsushima, so it is very familiar to the previous game. However, I would argue it is better in every aspect. The story, I'll get into the story a little bit. The story is better, the combat is better, the exploration and the world design are better. So even though this is a very safe and expected sequel, it is a very good sequel because it takes the pillars that made the original game so beloved and improves upon them in very noticeable ways.
Hmm, nice. And how much bigger is this game compared to the first one? Is it about the same or?
Uh, Content wise, I would say it's about the same size. I took around 38 hours to complete the story of this game, and this included doing a couple of side quests here and there. I wasn't really going out of my way to 100% the game or anything like that, but doing a healthy amount of side quests and the stories took, I would say, I would say most people will take between 30 and 40 hours to complete the game, which is about the size of the original. So I think content wise and world wise, it's about the same size.
Okay.
What is noticeably different though is that this takes place 300 years timeline wise after the first one. So Tsushima took place in the 1100s. Takes place in the 1400s in a totally different region of Japan, the Hokkaido region where Izo and Mount Yotei are. Also, you will notice that there's a totally new character, Atsu, who is the protagonist. Her story is noticeably different than the original, than the Tsushima story, because the Tsushima story was more about a samurai war and the conflicts that arose from that war. This one is a much more personal story. It's Atsu, she's on a revenge journey, and it's more about her personal growth as a character from this journey because the way this game is structured, she is hunting this gang called the Yotei Six. So you essentially have six main targets you have to assassinate throughout the entire game. And one of the interesting things about how this game is structured is that you can approach those targets in any order you want to. You do one target at the beginning as the tutorial mission, but then you have three main story objectives you have to complete, and you can technically do those in any order, and you can miss large swaths of the game or possible combat trees depending on your choices. Personally, I wouldn't recommend skipping that, but it's really interesting how the game is designed to be much more non-linear than the original game, and that's one of the parts of it that really struck out to me. It's not quite as open as something as, say, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is, but it definitely has a really good balance between player choices and the narrative that the Sony exclusives are known for.
Hmm, okay. Um, so very you can take it as a linear game if you want to there, point A to point B, do the missions right there. Okay.
Right. I mean, they definitely tell you like, here's what you need to do to advance the story and whatnot. But how you do it is totally up to you. If you want to go north to fight the Oni, or if you want to go to the east to fight the Kitsune instead, or go south to fight the dragon and the spider, who are all different members of the Yotei Six, you're totally free to choose however you want to approach that. There there you will definitely get different weapons earlier and different combat abilities, though, depending on what regions you go to. For example, if you go north to say fight the Oni, you'll unlock something called the Oni's Flare, which is an ability that lets you light your sword on fire and cut through enemies easier. But if you go through the Kitsune's path, you'll unlock a bunch of stealth options more quickly. So there are some consequences to choosing what missions you tackle first, but at the same time, it is really interesting to see a Sony exclusive really open itself up to sort of non-linear and non-standard progressions like this.
Hmm. You mentioned, getting abilities there by doing some of these side missions, things like, this ability to light your sword on fire. And it seems like also with this game, big improvements, it seems like, in terms of gear, upgrades there, weapons. Is that true there? A lot of kind of variety there?
I would say so. I think the just from a purely gameplay perspective, the thing that is most improved is the combat because in the original Tsushima, your only weapon was your katana sword, which is cool, but you had the stance switching mechanic, so you would flip to the water stance to fight spear enemies and the moon stance to fight big brutes and so on and so forth. The only problem with that system was that since you're just limited to the sword, it doesn't really feel like you're kind of expanding your move set as much as you want to. In Yotei, though, the stances are replaced by entirely new weapons. So instead of getting a new sword stance, you'll get like the Kusurigama, where it lets you take out enemies at a range. You'll also get dual katanas or the Yari spear or the Nodachi eventually. So it greatly expands the combat options because the variety of weapons infinitely expand the combat possibilities more than the original stances did. And speaking of the time jump, you eventually get guns in this game, and that drastically changes the gameplay too, because guns have extremely limited ammunition because they're the old sort of manual reload guns that you have to do by hand. And true to life, they're sort of one hit kill weapons. So they add a nice wrinkle to the combat as well. And all this added variety to not only the weapons, but the combat and the enemy encounters that you do really make the combat and the act of playing this game much more enjoyable and much more open to player expression than the original did.
Hmm. Okay. Nice. Did you have a preference, favorite weapon that you went throughout the game?
I really like the spear and the dual katanas the most. The Kusurigama gets the silver medal though, but the spear and the dual katanas are really cool additions to weapons to the weapon wheel. And the combat is really cool too because it really more than any other sort of Sony first party games. I'm comparing it to stuff like God of War or Uncharted or Last of Us. It really forces the player to pay attention to the enemy patterns and whatnot because this game I don't think it's like super challenging, but it can definitely catch you off guard sometimes with its challenge. It's very easy to get cornered and die really easily because you didn't pay attention to the weapon combinations of the enemies. There's a system where, for example, the spear will be, short bladed weapons, and the 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 Nodachi is specifically designed to be used against brutes. But there's a whole system to sort of like of weapons counterbalancing each other out. And if you don't pay attention to that, this game will definitely catch you off guard. And it really forces the player to pay attention to their gear setup and how they're engaging with the system and not just like go in guns metaphorically guns blazing.
Yeah. What difficult did you play this game on?
I played it on normal and I thought that was a pretty appropriate challenge. There were a couple boss fights that kind of surprised me with how quickly they downed me. But to be fair, that was more on me because I'm kind of an impatient gamer and I hit the block and parry buttons too quickly a lot of times. So a lot of that was on me. But I felt normal was a very good challenge. Besides the combat, I think the thing that makes the Ghost series really stand out is the fact that there's sort of a checklist items of open world activities you can do. If you've ever played a Ubisoft game or anything like that, you know the kind of stuff I'm talking about. But at the same time, I really like that the open world activities really focus on the beauty of the world and also the samurai motif. Just as an example, to in order to increase your spirit, which you use in combat to do sort of upgraded abilities, like every weapon has a spirit ability to like count to slice through a guy real good and stuff like that. In order to increase that, you gotta strike bamboo stalks, sort of like, in a classic samurai movie sort of fashion. But and even though these activities are sort of bog standard in a lot of ways because they're kind of checklisty, the fact that they have an interesting motif and natural beauty to them because you see so much of the world makes them enjoyable. One open world activity I will say needs to go though, not just from Ghost of Yote, but every game in general, bandit camps. I hate bandit camps so much in any game they're in. They just need to go. They're boring and they're just like they're just the most boring thing possible because it's like, oh, we're just going to put a bunch of enemies in a closed off space and you just got to fight them.
Hmm.
No more bandit camps, please.
Okay. Did you play around with any of the modes of the game? I know they still have like the Kurosawa mode and they still have the black and white with the black and white there. There's a mode where all
Mm-hmm.
Japanese. I think they added a new mode where it's kind of what lo-fi. You can add lo-fi beats to it. Did you play around with any of those?
I only played it on the Japanese language. I admittedly am a bit of a weeb. I did not play this in English. I played it on the Japanese language track just because I don't know, samurai stuff. It felt more natural to have Japanese speaking dialogue. But that was the main mode I played around with. I have heard some of the lo-fi beats that's in Shinshiro Watanabe mode because Sucker Punch needs to prove how much of an anime fan they are. But I think the lo-fi beats are good. I don't really know if they fit necessarily with the theming and the story of Ghost of Yote all that much, but they are kind of cool side additions to play mostly in sort of like a post game sort of scenario. If I could go back to the story real quick, though, the story is good. I will say that it definitely gets better as it goes along. The revenge story Atsu goes on is admittedly kind of a generic setup for not only a samurai thing, but a video game story in general. We've seen this kind of scenario play out a lot, whether it's in God of War or even Last of Us 2 to a certain extent. But the game story admittedly does get better as it goes along because it does a good job of fleshing out Atsu as a character and making her motivations a bit more nuanced than just I gotta avenge my family because the Yotei Six are evil meanies. But I will say I think it's time to move on from revenge as a motivating factor for video game protagonists. It's done at this point. We need to have a new motivation for our protagonist to get involved with the game itself.
Hmm. Okay. I was going to ask you about that because I think there was an article written. I forgot the place I've written the article about common of these stories in video games, Ghost of Yote, God of War, the whole revenge kind of story there. So you say even though it's kind of a tired kind of trope now, but they still execute it well in this game.
Yeah, I think they execute. I think they execute it well. I don't think it's great though. Unfortunately, Last of Us Two. I know that game has a lot of weird controversies associated with it. But I think, just as an example, Last of Us 2 covered this exact same kind of topic in a much more interesting and nuanced way than Ghost of Yote does. And even God of War does it in a more nuanced way as well, because there's revenge elements to it, but there's a lot more interesting wrinkles to those stories than Ghost of Yote does. Even though Ghost of Yote does a reasonably good job of it. It's not one of the best video game stories I've ever seen or experienced, but I do think it is a good one.
Mm, okay. And is Erica Ishii? So is she doing the voice also for Japanese? Or is that another person?
I believe it's another person. I honestly did not catch the original actress, the Japanese actress's name, but I have heard several lines of Erica Ishii doing the dialogue of Atsu, and I think she does a really good job in it. I think she plays this character really well, and her facial acting from the cutscenes is really effective. She is very, very good in this role. It's
Oh.
Yeah, she does a good job.
Um. Yeah, so it says here, so the Japanese voice actress was Faro's Ai. There she's also done a lot of voice work for anime. It seems like also too JoJo Bizarre Adventure, Stone Ocean. There, she's also been
Okay.
in Chainsaw Man, so she's done some anime voice acting. So many people recognize her voice there with that.
But
Okay,
yeah, I think both versions of the main character do a really good job in their roles. But yeah, it's all good.
yeah, okay. Yeah, and this game is getting great reviews all around the board. Seems like a lot of people are pretty much liking it quite a bit. 86 out of 100 on Metacritic there, 94% out of Open Critics there. You played this on PS5, correct?
Yes, it's only available on the PS5 at the moment, but I would expect a PC port at some point in the near future, maybe 2026 or something like that.
Yeah. You played it on PS5. Any performance issues? Anything kind of going on there? Things pretty much loaded quick. Any weird
Oh
glitches,
no.
bugs?
Okay. Performance-wise, this game is basically flawless. It ran on six. I always play all my games on performance mode just because I prefer the frames per second more than the graphic stuff. But the performance mode ran excellently. It loaded lightning quick, kind of like Death Stranding 2 did earlier this year. And from a technical standpoint and an artistic standpoint, this game holds up wonderfully. There are a couple of bugs though. No, not major bugs, just more like funny bugs. There are a couple of times, particularly in jumping sections, because there's some times where you have to climb along the white painted rock wall and stuff like that. There are a couple of times where the jumping just wigs out for no reason and it doesn't land on the platform that you want it to. Or one of the funniest ones was um, I jumped forward to jump on a platform, but then Atsu just for the game just darted her forward like way more than anticipated and just ran her into the wall and was clipping through the level geometry and stuff like that. So a couple weird funny bugs, but nothing game breaking or anything like that.
Hmm. Okay. Do you have any other real negatives? I mean, you spoke about maybe some glitches, but nothing really kind of didn't break the experience for you. You mentioned the story was a little weak, but any other issues there you had with the game?
I will say I think towards the end there's a little bit of a lack of variety in not only the open world activities but the combat as well, because by the time you get all the weapons, I can't there's sort of a lack of enemy variety because all the enemies will come in either guys with bows, guys with katanas, or the five weapons you get essentially and guns. But there's not really a but since we're stuck in samurai and real world trappings, there's not a huge variety in the enemies or how they engage with you. If this was in a fantasy setting, as an example, I feel like you could get more variety in fantasy monsters and fantasy creatures and things like that. But due to the theming of this game, you kind of see every enemy you're gonna get aside from the bosses about two-thirds of the way through. And likewise, the open world activities, while I did enjoy them, they kind of run into the Ubisoft problem where even though there's better variety in how you interact with them in Yotei as opposed to Tsushima, you're still kind of doing the same things over and over again. And eventually it gets kind of dull. I had the same problem eventually with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I think any kind of open world that's heavily reliant on checkbox activities eventually runs into this problem.
Hmm. Okay. So, what would be your final thoughts rating Ghost of Yote?
My final thoughts are that this is a very good sequel. It's better than Ghost of Yote in every way I can think of. And despite this not being the most adventurous or ambitious sequel I've ever played, it fulfills the samurai action fantasy that gamers want pretty perfectly. I think there's room for improvement in particularly in the story and in the way the open world activities are play out. But at the same time, this is a really good action adventure game. And I think anyone who buys it is going to be really pleased with it. I give this a low peak gaming. Not perfect, but a very good game in its genre, and I think fans will enjoy it quite a bit.
Mm, nice there. You get to pet the you got a wolf with you or is it a dog?
Oh yeah, yes. You get a wolf. There's a story reason why the wolf comes with you, and sometimes it'll help. The wolf will help in combat. Like you can do these standoffs in enemy bases, and sometimes the wolf will join you and help you take out guys. But eventually, you do get to pet the wolf, and you get to pet the foxes. So it fulfills that necessary criteria.
Mm. And you also get to play an instrument, a musical instrument in this, right? Do you just play it in select scenes or can you just whip it out and play it anytime you want?
You technically can play it anytime you want to. You use the touchpad to on the PlayStation controller to select the instrument, and then you use the touchpad to like find the notes you need. But it's not super necessary. It's more just like an artistic flourish more than a fully fleshed out gameplay mechanic. But at the same time, it adds to the sort of the natural beauty of the world, and it's very thematically appropriate for Atsu as a character and for the story. So not really necessary, but it's a cool little personal touch that I liked.
Okay. It's not is it like when you play Last of Us and you had a guitar, you can people can make songs. Can people do that with here too? Or no?
It's not as extensive as Last of Us. You can't play individual notes on the shamisen instrument. You basically have a list of songs, and you select from the song, and then you find the note on the touchpad. Whereas Last of Us, you could actually play the individual notes and try to play through the fire and flames with Ellie if you wanted to, or play One Winged Angel in the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth piano. It's not as extensive as any of those.
Oh, okay. So you won't see anybody with videos playing Enter the Sandman or anything with Ghost of Yote. Oh, okay.
No, maybe in the third game they'll give the protagonist an instrument where you can play, Inner Sandman or Nothing Else Matters or any of the other power metal ballads that you can think of.
Gotcha. Okay. And this game is $70 there, so full $70 right now. And probably a while before it ever goes on sale there since it's a brand new one. But you recommend paying full price for this, huh?
I recommend paying full price to it. I think this is a very good game in this genre, and it gives you enough quality gameplay to really make it worth it. So I fully recommend it. No strings attached to it.
Okay. And so you give it a high tune in or a peak?
I give it a low peak gaming just because I think you know the variety and the combat and the world design stuff gets old after a while, but at the same time, it's still a really engaging game. So low peak gaming.
Nice. Okay. So a low peak gaming from Neal for Ghost of Yote there. Available now for people. If you have PlayStation, you can get it now. There. Did you get a physical copy or did you buy a digital?
I got a physical copy. My wife actually got it for me as like an early anniversary gift, so she always gets games physical.
Oh, nice. Okay, very cool there.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you so much, Neil.
of course, happy to do it.